This is your coffee break. Hi, friends. I am back for another episode of Coffee Break with you, and I am so pleased to have here as a guest today on Coffee Break, Reshounn Foster. Reshounn is an avid listener and advocate of the Right Now podcast, and I am just so pleased that she contacted me. Reshounn, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, well, I consider myself a brazen careerist. And so I've had, I don't know, like probably more than 2 dozen jobs in my life, but they've all come back to my first love, which is writing. Interestingly enough, I've begun to take on a hobby called anthroponymy, which is a subcategory of onomastics. Anthroponymy is the study of the history of the origin of names. And onomastics is the study of the history of names, but on a broader sense of geography, birth names, and also just business names and things like that. As an introduction to myself, my name is Reshounn. The RESH, which is something I found out within the past year, is Hebrew for rabbi, or spiritual counselor. And OUNN, which this is where I say God's got jokes. OUNN is when you unscramble it and put it in the right, order. It's noun. Someone has said high priestess of names, that I accept that. But the OUNN, because it's unscrambled, that's why I said guys got jokes. When I was a little girl, I used to love to play with my words. And so I was a writer even then, and also an editor, and I used to make crossword puzzles. And okay, so I'm 47 years old. So
You do not
this,
look like it. You look so young.
I know I've been told 27. I'm like, yay, okay, I'm
All
doing something
right.
right. Um, and years ago, when there were lithographs and you had to like take your hand and like roll the little crank or whatever to get copies printed. So I used to actually hand create word puzzles, the little crosswords and word searches and things like that. So I had a huge love for words, spelling bees. If I wanted to know anything, I always had a dictionary or encyclopedia or an encyclopedia of encyclopedias near me. Thank God for the internet now, because anytime I don't know something, like, oh, that sounds exciting, let me go study it. So then you know how you get on the internet and you're like hyperlinked to like five other millions of things. So yeah, I've always had a love for words, writing poetry, reciting poetry. Had a lot of classes in English and psychology and sociology and things like that, and I just loved that. So that my mother and my grandmother and great uncle and other people in my family were my benefactors in college. I said, well, before I take them on a spin, let me figure out exactly what I'm going to do with an English degree. And then I decided I was going to try my luck at advertising copywriting. So I called a couple of friends. I said, what can I do with a degree, in advertising? And this is how naive I was, right? So not knowing that, well, they have to write scripts, they have to write concepts, they have to write broadcast, print, ads, and everything. So again, I called my friends and she introduced me to somebody, and I worked at an advertising agency. They hired me and I wrote some taglines for a radio spot. Now, mind you, I did not know what a copywriter was 2 weeks before they hired me.
I think that's how a lot of us get our first jobs, though. We're like, what, a job? Okay.
Right. So I went, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool to be around other creative people. And we're listening to music because we have to match the music to the scripts and everything. So that's how I got, and then my family, when I told them the plan, and I actually had the job when I got, gave them the plan of what I was going to do. So it seemed to be, okay, well, that's fine. She can do something other than teach. So I still love and adore and advocate teaching. However, I'm more of an educator and sharing of information instead of teaching in the classroom. So that's pretty much how I've gotten everything that I've ever done, actually, by listening, reading a book, and then just saying, hey, let's just go ahead and let's try and do it. So fast forward to now, I am writing a little bit of everything, and I've written everything from poems to lists of things in my journals, and journal writing has been therapeutic for me. The Out My Right Mind started in around 2009.
Can you tell us a little bit of background about that?
Yeah, so a lot of these things I'm just like now finding out, because when I was focused, and you hear my dog in the background.
Oh,
Hi, puppy.
hi, puppy.
um, in 2009, I had lost my job as a communication specialist writer. And my daughter, bless her heart, she introduced me to Facebook. I had just bought a house in 2008, then lost my job in 2009. Just got a house and I'm about to lose the house. And so, what am I going to do? So, when you lose your job, you lose your house, you lose, I lost, I should say, part of my self identity is like I'm a writer. So when I lose a job as a writer, what does that say about me, my self-esteem, my confidence even in writing? And I have this Facebook account because I end up becoming a seclusive person. I went into like this crazy, mass, severe depression. And then through the power of Facebook, I started to reach out to people and just explain like what I was going on and feeling like I didn't want to be out in the world, but having social media as a way to be connected to people. And so because I've always considered journal writing therapy for me, I just started doing it online. I didn't feel like the pen and paper fit for me at the time. And so I just started posting stuff on Facebook. And what ended up happening was that, through the immediate gratification, the likes and the people commenting, but then people began to inbox me, applauding me and saying, thank you so much for your post. That was really inspirational, and telling me that they were feeling the same way, but they didn't have the words to explain what they were feeling. And so that made me want to do it even more. I did receive some backlash, however, because some of the posts were also discussing the dark periods of, being in home and going through self-identity stuff. I call that phase my Job moment because I had lost not only the house and the job, but had also lost family members as well. My father and my grandfather in 2007, 3 weeks apart. Then every year since then, I had lost a significant family member. And so just the writing of that and what it feels like to go through these, traumatic life experiences. And we know that death is a part of life. We get it. However, that doesn't console you at the time when you're going through the phases and, wanting to touch a family member, pick up the phone and call. So writing for me just really, Facebook saved my life. It was some really, really dark, dark moments, but that people liked that I was sharing. And that's what, Out My Right Mind really started off as.
Tell me a little bit more about, and I can also just kind of let you you have a wonderful narrative thread that you're going through here. So this is awesome. I actually work for sort of an advertising agency right now. And I'm always curious about the things that we want to write and the things that we need to write for work. And like just the healing that came out when you were writing for yourself finally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that writing, I used my poetry as an entryway into advertising copywriting. And so that was interesting because there's the creative and then there's the finance. You have to be able to write creatively. And so I had that part of it and the use of words in prose and how, the alliteration and that captures people's attention. And so you use the mechanics of creative writing, definitely, to tell the story and to use the right words for, to create the images, to paint the pictures and things like that. And then what also happened, because I used to do spoken word then too. And so what happened is that paradigm shift writing for corporate, and I used to say this, I don't say it anymore, but I used to say writing commercial bastardized my creativity. Because then there's the approval processes. There's you're writing for an account, and they have specifications. They have, we have the creative briefs. So it tells us all the demographics and it tells us, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. Those I'm familiar with.
So there's the layers of what needs to happen, and that takes precedence over the creative part. It began to be really, really hard to be a poet again. One of the other things, though, that I did appreciate about working in the ad agency is that it did give me structure to writing that cross between, when you're writing academically and writing reports and things like that. So that was something. And people, when you say that you're a writer, they automatically, and particularly me, because when people see me, they automatically know, oh my God, you're an artist. I go, yeah,
Well, that's
okay.
kind of nice. I like that.
It is. And then, the whole, not the stigma, but the stereotype of what an artist does
Yeah.
and what a writer does. People think that you're not going to make a living with writing, that you can make $65,000 a year as a freelance writer, according to Robert Bly's book back in the 90s or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's the book that I got when I got into advertising. I went, let me read this book
Mm-hmm.
and let me get my stopwatch. Okay, I can do this. That was my first assignment. Okay, I can do this. And so that corporate writing validated me as a writer as well, that you do spend your time thinking for a long period of time before you actually put pen to paper or put your fingers to the keys. It is rewarding to be able to live your life as an artist, whatever artist that you want to be, but to live your life as a writer, and then to say, yes, I'm a writer. Oh, well, really? And then the looks, and oh, I'm a corporate writer. And then it's like, oh, okay, what do you write? And then you go on the list and you go, wow, okay, yeah, I've written those commercials, or I've written that print ad. That is rewarding. The depression had gotten so bad that I was in the bed some days, not all the time, but some days I was just exhausted, tired, in the bed 12 to 14 hours straight, holding my urine. You don't have to edit that because it's just real. Not bathing, not eating, just really, really like going through something. So it was like one of the darkest phases in my life, Job moment. But then I found that when you go through that type of depression, you also, I called it my womb stage, where I went right back in and did so much inner reflection. And so again, that's how the Out My Right Mind started too. Also, what happened during that period of time, my best friend, who we met when we were doing HIV prevention work in Detroit, and she's a native Detroiter, but she lives out in California. Her name is Imani Williams, and she's a social activist, feminist, journalist, and she was out in California. So she's seeing my posts, and she was like, and we call each other Sissy. Sissy, you come out here and you get you some sun. And so I said, okay, because she saw my post and she was not liking what she was seeing. Mm. So I went out there and stayed out there with her and another friend for like 3 months. But that reinvigorated me to be out there in the sun. But I also started reading poetry again. And there's something about reading poetry away from home, in a different atmosphere, in a different environment with different people listening, and they don't know who you are. So it's when they give you inspiration. I mean, you never want to take it for granted anyway, whether you're at home or whether you're wherever else. But it was just something about the atmosphere there. So I just continued to out my right mind even more, and came back home to another passing. And then some friends of mine that I went to high school with, they were on the board of Broadside Press, which is now Broadside Lotus Press. Broadside Press specifically was founded by Dudley Randall and is the oldest African-American press in the United States. And Lotus Press, Naomi Long Madgett, who was also Detroit's poet laureate, connected. But back then, before they actually merged, my friend said, hey, why don't you put some of your stuff on our website? And I was like, are you kidding me? Broadside Lotus Press have published works by Maya Angelou, Sonia Sanchez, Haki Matabuti, Dudley Randall, Gwendolyn Brooks. I mean, some major, major people. So I'm like, am I that good? I'm that kind of good. And the whole premise of Broadside Lotus Press is to publish authors and poets who tell the stories of the everyday experiences of African American life. And it has, its own backstory. It has its own flavor. It has its own style and colors and textures. And every culture and every writer does it. There's just something about that experience, And so I just felt like, wow, cool. So right now, Out My Right Mind is still on Facebook. However, I have been blessed to have people who I am merging with, interconnecting with, who have followed me for some time, and they're encouraging me to make it a podcast. So I'm like, okay, cool. So now that I know Sarah Werner, I'm like listening, like I'm listening to format now. I'm like, okay, so she asked this question. And then yeah, the whole Out My Right Mind experience. I mean, it's kind of like this web of stuff. There are things that I also want to further explore about writing. We always talk about writing to get published, and what if you don't want to get published, or what if I've got so much content. I've got 40 or close to 40 journals that I've kept. And like my whole life story is in all of these books. And like, how long would it take to edit all of that? So can it be turned into a memoir? That's cool. But I really, really like the idea of talking about the writing process. That's why I appreciate what you do so much. I was fortunate enough that in 2012, when the foreclosure finally became final, I actually had to move out. I moved in with a family member for a short period of time, but my best friend of 27 years gave me the keys to her home and said, I want you to have some peace. That's a whole nother, like, I could tell you that forever. And so the keys to her home is her family home. There are 5 generations that have lived in this house. And the house, I moved from North Rosedale Park, which is a pretty affluent area in Detroit, to Detroit's historical North End. And the North End, I refer to it as the garden that grew Motown. The across the alley from me, the house is no longer there, but Barry Gordy's lot, where the family house used to be, is across the alley from me. So I'll stand in the bathroom window from time to time and just like, oh, okay, so that's where the magic began. And so I kind of like draw that magic in.
Yeah. Are you still there now then? Or,
Yep, I'm still here
oh,
now. And in order to push me through my Job moment, because advertising and thinking in campaign themes, so I came up with the personal campaign theme for me, which is hip and zen in the North End. And there is something magical that I experienced when I walked over here and walked through the neighborhood. The neighborhood in the North End it's unique in its history and legend. Like Oakland Avenue is a place that was really, really, let's say, jumping and it thrived. It had a lot of, it was a commercial and retail strip, restaurants, bars, butcher shops, everything that you could possibly imagine in, a downtown urban setting. However, the 67 riots and white flight and some of the other social political stuff, gentrification, things like that, began to influence the financial stability of the community. And that's not unlike any other, that particular part, the dilapidation of the neighborhood is something that is consistent in other pockets in Detroit.
mm-hmm.
You may have heard about it through, the news and things like that. But the one thing that I can say about the North End is that there are people who are here, residents who are here, 5 generations, sometimes some more, that really are committed to sustaining the legacy, sustaining the arts, because it has been a cultural arts place. The Apex Bar and Phelps Lounge, and some other bars and restaurants have been legendary for having the R&B and jazz and blues legends here. Ike and Tina Turner, the staple singers, John Lee Hooker, Milton Little Richard, B.B. King. So, and it's just flourishing. So that energy is still here. So I'm walking through the neighborhood now. Unfortunately, the school systems don't give you the civics education about your own neighborhood a lot.
Right.
It's like, well, you want us to learn American government and civics, and I don't know what's relevant to where I live. So, and that was in 2012, 2013. I listened to Spirit. I was driving one day and Spirit said, here, go to this community development corporation. So I go in there, I meet this woman. She said, here, are you a poet? So I laugh because I'm going, yeah, okay. What does this mean? I'm like, something special is about to happen. So it's a flyer to go to a meeting, and I reconnect with somebody who I call my brother-in-law. His name is Ulysses. And so Ulysses, and I see other people there, and I go, I know I am in the right place. And what it was a community arts festival that was being planned. I was like, oh my God, what can I contribute? So as a writer, I contributed, but not so much the writing aspect as it was the conceptual, like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about, like, oh my God, we should do this or we should do that. So it was like the ideas. So always ideas before writing. We then had this really, really great community arts festival in the North End on Oakland Avenue in the Oakland Avenue Community Garden and Greenhouse. And it was specifically for the community. We had a successful event, and then there were us who created then the Oakland Avenue Artists Coalition. So I'm also one of the founding board members of the coalition, and then just continuing to write. So then it was like, well, Out My Right Mind now is being written in Hip and Zen in the North End, because I turned the personal campaign into the theme for the house. Artists in Residence, what I wanted to do over in North Rosedale Park, to have a community of artists in the North End. That's why I'm not like all cringing, like, okay, fine, I lost that house. My daughter said, well, Mom, if you got that house, gotta give you another one. Okay, so now I have another house and I have the community. There's a community of people who we rally together, we assist each other. And now I also have a jazz den. I've had performers come, live musicians come into the house. And so I've had one, I'm having another one this Saturday. And hopefully it'll turn into having a writer's den as well, as a lot of my friends are writers.
I love this. I love what comes through. What I've heard come through for you so much is this theme of community. You have your Facebook community. You have this community of family and trauma within that family and tragedy. But then you also have this, I feel like, healing group of people, of artists and fellow writers who really continue to lift you up. And I love writing communities. Can you tell me more about that?
It is where, and it's interesting because, when you think of community, you think of like everybody coming together. It's more like branching out. This is the one part too, that when I was writing corporate, that everyone there, there are pockets where people, when I was actually in school, we will workshop our writing, the poems and things like that. So those are things that I kind of like didn't do. So some things were like pushed aside. There are writing communities here, the Motown Writers Network, Broadside Press, the Detroit Poet Society. There are different pockets that I still haven't fully taken advantage of because I have been secluded and a recluse. And don't feel sad for me, because being a recluse is kind of okay.
Yeah, no, totally.
Empathic, intuitive too. So it's kind of like, I go out and talk to the humans and then I come back home where it's sacred and quiet.
I get that.
Yeah, exactly. But the writing communities do exist for me. I just haven't tapped into them enough, I think. Writing is so personal, and particularly the kind of writing that I do, most of it is really therapeutic writing, and it's in my journal or it's on Facebook. And so, you never want to judge or critique someone's emotions, because that's what you're really doing, which is different when you're, writing a script or something, and people can say, okay, well, here's a technique that you may want to try. So that I would be able to merge some of those things, like to really write something and then give it to somebody, and I'm okay with them editing. People ask me, here, can you read my work? And I'm going, oh no. Do you understand what you're asking me? And then what does that mean when you want me to read your work? Do you want me to read it for content? Do you want me to do a line edit? Do you want me to tell you how I feel as a result of reading your work? What emotions came up for me? There's people, the layperson doesn't understand when you hand something over to be edited. It's like, there's 10 different ways to edit something. Like, I'll proofread it in grammar and typos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, you don't want me to edit. But I like to sit with someone and talk about and just kind of facilitate rather than to be an editor. If I were to do a book, the first one would probably be my Namemoirs, which I think that's the one that I wrote about when I emailed you.
Yeah.
Namemoirs. And then the first piece was how my daughter got her name. And that goes back to the anthroponymy stuff, like, the idiom, live up to your name. What would it be like if everybody knew the definition of their name and then to actually live up to that definition? Again, we're talking about the energy of words. In your name is a calling. People call your name. When you think about then the word vocation, the root word is vocare, to call. What is your calling in life? What is your purpose in life? Well, yeah, when you write things down, they actually come true. it's that energy. It is magic. And then it comes in like right now in my kitchen, the walls that were put up, the paneling in the walls, and it's like one of those, I guess, 60s or 70 things. There's, I don't know what it's called. It's not laminate. It's some kind of material, whatever. But I found out a year after I moved, I looked at it and I started feeling the walls. I went, this feels like dry erase board. So I got a dry erase marker and I started writing on the walls. And I said, oh my God, this is freaking exciting. Yeah, so I write on the walls and things just happen. I write on there and then I take pictures of it and I just erase. And I got that idea from my friends at Broadside because they have a dry erase board, but I've got like 4 walls.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
There's something gorgeous about, I don't know, like making that part of your home, like surrounding yourself with these words and like building, I don't know, building up your environment with these words. I'm kind of curious also. I want to know what you're writing now and like any connection that you see between the poetry that you had been writing and maybe you still are writing and sort of this therapeutic journaling. Is there any crossover there? Are they 2 different things?
Yeah, there's definitely crossover. What I'm writing now is just thoughts, plans about what I'm going to do next. Like the hip and zen, like I have an opportunity for it to become an artist in residence. And so the business planning, the drafts and things like that. So I'm doing that part. It's like creative writing. I'm creating my own vision of how I want to live my life. The Out My Right Mind, that I go and actually look at this collection of Facebook posts. Those are the outlines, I guess you could say, or the writing prompts of what a blog and what a podcast would be. So it's just arranging them and saying, okay, hey, somebody who's going to set up my blog. Okay, so this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So I've got content, 5 years of content.
Oh my gosh.
That's some of the things that's coming up. But there's definitely the blend because, like I said, right out my right mind is basically writing prompts. Like I could be on there like, there's something that I might read somebody else's post or listen to a podcast and I go, oh my God, that's something that I feel, fired up about. And I get the pen and I get, something writing or it's stuck in my head because I know for a fact that that's something I need to write about. And so it's just a matter of fleshing it out so that it actually makes more sense. When I post, I always put in parentheses, unedited streams of consciousness or unedited streams of writing. Because journal writing is not where you want to stifle any of the thought with punctuation and it makes sense. It's literally like a stream of consciousness writing, which you just start writing and sometimes it doesn't make sense. It's just, you splat it from your head. It's just like taking a paintbrush and dipping in the paint and then you just throw it up there. So that's what the posts look like, a lot of times. So they literally are unedited. So that I would compile them, let's say it is in a book, that some of them may just stay unedited. Some of it may actually broaden itself, expand into poetry. And some of it may actually be recorded. I don't know. I have like friends that are musicians, and one of them in particular saying, so the world needs to hear these stories. And what would it sound like, with music in the background? My favorite genre of music is jazz, and specifically the avant-garde. And, so that's why Out My Right Mind, when I started listening more into jazz and actually studying jazz, the history of jazz, and that it has those African polyrhythms in it and the field hollers and everything about the American experience through African American eyes, that it's like, oh, my writing is that too, because it's the writing through my eyes and experiences of things that I've gone through. So, what would it be like to like mesh those things together and just like, wow.
I love that.
Yeah, so it's exciting. It's literally like in that thought phase. And so it's like, okay, so now it's time to execute.
Do you feel like you got a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit like from the advertising agency?
I got it from the advertising agency, the creative juices, the structure again, because you have the creative department. So it's like me as the creative director. You have these different roles that you play in the creative department. I'm not a graphics designer by any means, but because I've hung out with graphic designers, like I know how to have a reasonably intelligent conversation. Photography the same way, because we used to look at director's reels. I did casting. So I have all of that that I look at and go, okay, I can use that now for me. The entrepreneurial spirit actually has come from different places. My paternal grandfather, that side of the family, my dad's side of the family, came from the east end of Asheville, North Carolina. And the east end of Asheville, North Carolina is the area historically that was where African Americans were as a result of segregation. So that my family heritage on that side, my grandfather was a self-made entrepreneur. His father was an entrepreneur. The grocery stores, and my grandfather owned a motel here at one time, the Town Motel. And he owned the grocery store way before I was born, but the motel I remember. So I remember my grandfather, and unfortunately, and I don't know, and this is me, this is the story that I made up, not necessarily the story that's true. So I'm second oldest grandchild. I'm a girl. So we don't teach girls how to balance books and take them into, and particularly a motel. You don't take the girls into the motel. So there's this, idea of I watched it from afar, but I know what hard work looks like. I know the diligence that it takes. It's been role modeled for me. Now it's time for me to actually take action and pull, okay, well, what would my grandfather do kind of thing. On my mom's side of the family, our matrilineage is that we come from wives of preachers, wives of coal miners, daughters of coal miners, and that my grandmother and her siblings were, came up here, and both sides of my family came up north, through the Great Migration when all the blacks came up to Detroit, Chicago, New York, Midwest, because of the industries, the factories, and particularly the automotive industry, to work in the plants and things. And so on my mom's side of the family, that's what happened. My grandmother was a teacher's assistant, but my grandmother was very, very astute with her money and astute with her time. And she was very active in the community, Concord Street Block Club, for example. But that there's this leadership that I have access to. And so that they are now ancestors. I call their names all the time. And I keep their pictures surrounded, in the home up front. And I talk to them all the time. Like, okay, Grandma, no. Yeah, okay, I probably shouldn't have spent money on that. I probably should have, so those kinds of things, like the direction, the leadership. I'm invoking all of that through their names, calling their names, and remembering what I need to know in order to stay on tangent. And that I also surround myself, with people who are also in leadership capacity. Because I've gone through the Job moment, there's a paradigm shift that you go through. There's like some amnesia. You go into the womb state, so you come out of the womb state and you're going, okay, so I know I'm still this person. Some of the stuff has gone away and some of the stuff is in memory. What do I need to pull out of my memory to strengthen me in order to go forward? So all of these different things, like that I was a leader in different capacities. Now I have to remember that stuff and I have to use those muscles again. That self-discipline, that's something that I have to work on, but that I have access to it, that's going to help me a lot.
You know so much about the history of your family. Not everybody has that, and I'm just a little envious that you have that. We go through so many generations, and at least with my family, I have no idea what my grandparents did, and that's really amazing that you have that, and that these lives they've led have become part of your life. You spoke earlier of vocation and calling. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like that's kind of built into your family history? It kind of sounds like. And then what do you feel like your calling is?
I do believe that is worthy to explore your name, because your name is called. I mean, think about every use in life, every situation, every transaction that you make in this world is based on your name. You sign your name on documents. You give your name. I think it's really worthy for people to really look at the definition of the name, particularly if you're lost. You call your name. And when you answer, what are you going to answer to? what is your role in life? What is your purpose, your passion, your soul mission, life purpose, all of that? It very well could be in your name. And yes, I do believe Reshounn Lanice Foster. Foster is a name that I live up to, that I am a person who is nurturing, that I am a person who, if I see or hear of a friend that has an idea, I'm just as excited as they are. Like, oh my God, you want to do this? Like, I had a friend that stayed with me for a period of time, and she was into visual art. She is not into, but she is a visual artist. She lived in the house with me for a period of time. She had this idea of doing group meditation. It's not something that she created here. She created it before she moved here. But we had an opportunity to see what does that look like for group meditation, improvisational, spiritual dance, get up, move. We put on some house music, deep soul gospel house music or whatever, and there were 30 people here one time. So it got big enough where she actually, that theme, Hippens Inn in North End is a healing arts dojo and creative incubator. So the idea for her to do group meditation and the dance and things like that, and I did some name readings, that was here, and it incubated the idea, and then she ended up doing it several different times in the community at large. So, yeah, so I do believe that to live up to my own name is to assist people with their ideas. You're constantly evolving and finding out things about yourself. That self identity, self definition, self discovery leads to self reclamation. And, when you look at like these sociological models and people, who are into community development, community organizing, we always have this model in our head what community looks like, and it looks like it's so big. But at the core of community, when you look at those diagrams, what's at the core? The individual. It's so important to look at who you are.
Oh
And
my
I
gosh.
think that when people look at who they are, and then they actually journaled their thoughts, because your thoughts, when you journal them and you write them down, they're snapshots of what's in your head. We have all these voices in our heads telling us what to do and where we're supposed to go and how we're supposed to be. That's well and fine, but filter all of that out. Go back to you. Meditate on yourself and do it through writing, and then look at what's in your head. Make sense of it. Start from there.
I appreciate that so much. You've been so amazing, and your wisdom and your insight, and even the history, the personal history that you were able to share with us today, it just says so much. Reshounn, thank you so much for your time and your energy and your beautiful smile. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Like I said, it's been an honor and a privilege, and I absolutely love and adore you, and I champion you. Thank you right now at Coffee Break. Ah, yes. Bye-bye, honey.